My name is Zeba Wunderlich, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Developmental and Cell Biology. My primary teaching responsibility is Biosci 97, which is a large introductory genetics course that I taught remotely for the first time in the fall of 2020. So 97 is a huge class, and as 2020 unfolded and it became clear that I would be teaching remotely, there were kind of two concurrent thoughts in my head. The first is that I needed to start early to figure out the logistics of how to deliver course materials to the very large number of students in that class, who were learning in a wide range of environments. The second was that, although I couldn't predict this, the fall ended up being incredibly stressful. Between a COVID surge, social unrest, an uncertain election, and even wildfires, I wanted to figure out how to create a supportive and collegial environment, even though we wouldn't all be in the same physical space. So on the logistics front, there were basically two design principles that I used to develop the course. The first is just to keep things simple. I tried to keep the number of tools that we use to interact and to deliver course material to a minimum, to make things both simple and accessible for me and the students. And the second design principle I kept in mind is that students are in many different places and they may have different constraints. And so I tried to create many different ways that the students could interact with each other and with me to allow each of them to find a route that worked given their circumstances. So we use things like the chat in Zoom, we use virtual hand raising, we use poll questions and asynchronous discussions to make sure that each student could interact in a way that was amenable to them. What actually really surprised me was on the front of creating this supportive environment, it actually didn't feel that different from between a remote environment and an in-person environment. I did things like briefly sharing some of my own struggles with the pandemic or encouraging students to take risks and try and answer questions even when they weren't sure. And all of these basic principles that I would use in an in-person classroom actually easily translated to the remote environment. And it also reinforced that UCI students are really a tenacious bunch. So many of my students reached out and shared some of the obstacles that 2020 brought for them, like parents being laid off or sick or extra duties at home, anxiety or depression. But through that all, I saw so many examples of how their hard work and determinations really paid off in their growth throughout the quarter. So taken together, I was really pleasantly surprised at how, with a bit of advanced planning and some thought, remote teaching actually didn't feel as different as I expected it would. And it actually allowed me to try a lot of new activities and assignments when some of the constraints of the physical classroom were removed. I'm very grateful to have been selected for this award, and I'd also like to recognize the many people who supported the success of the course, including a wonderful team of TAs, peer tutors, LARC tutors, my co-instructor, and my colleagues and DTI staff who provided useful suggestions and support.